All right, it looks like we have 11:30 for today, but we're going to still give a couple more minutes for the folks to start to continue to trickle in. I do want to thank everybody for joining us, and I'm going to be your moderator for today, so we'll try to guide some of the discussion. Hopefully, you're enjoying this nice and cool Colorado morning. I'm buried in snow. I already had to debury my car twice so I could take daycare. So hopefully you got some hot chocolate, and we'll start here in a few minutes and get everything going.
I'm surprised daycare was still open. That's great.
You know, they gotta stay open. They gotta get paid, and so. All right, I'm seeing a lot of faces now, and I think we have the majority, or at least a lot of people in. So we'll go ahead and get started. At first, I wanted to start by introducing myself. My name is Esteban Bedoya. I am a major in the United States Space Force, so an officer. For those that are knowledgeable of the nomenclature, I am also an immigrant. I was born in Colombia, South America, and I migrated here when I was young, around 15 years. But most importantly, I'm a JAMLEC supporter, and I have been a JAMLEC supporter for some time now. And I appreciate, again, the opportunity to guide some of this conversation for the crisis that's going on in our city, and to be able to share some of this information for all the people that are joining online, and hopefully for all the people that we can share this through, social media and the other channels that JAMLEC manages through, and hopefully you get some information out of it. And so before I introduce the actual panelists that are going to be going through and discussing this hot topic with us today, I wanted to first let Steve and Sulma, the co-founders of JAMLEC. Steve Thompson is, of course, the executive director, and Sulma is the co-founder and the immigration director. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Steve, and for him to say a couple of words. Steve, over to you. Hey, Steve. Yep, I think you're on mute. There we go.
And the host muted me. I just want to make that note. Good morning, everyone. As Esteban said, my name's Steve Thompson. I'm the executive director of Justice and Mercy Legal Aid Center. And it's my privilege to welcome you all to today's session. Thank you for joining us in this virtual format. We were hoping to be in person, but you never know with Colorado weather in the spring. But your presence here signifies the importance of the topics we're about to delve into. First, I want to talk briefly about the work we do at JAMLEC. For 18 years, we've been providing civil legal services to low-income individuals and communities, primarily victims of domestic violence and other crimes. We continue to provide full representation and legal advocacy services, in addition to these newer services that we're providing to our arriving migrants. Our commitment to addressing the migrant crisis involves a wide array of partnerships. We've been actively involved in workshops and initiatives alongside various organizations and groups who are addressing this issue. Those include significant collaboration with organizations and entities, including Christian organizations like Lutheran Family Services and Catholic Charities and Cross Purpose, as well as governmental agencies. Each of these entities brings a unique perspective and important resources to the table. Together, we're striving to seek justice and make a meaningful impact on the lives of those who struggle with poverty and oppression, which is exactly the mission of JAMLEC. Today's session is designed to foster understanding and action. We aim to provide an overview of the current migrant crisis, focusing on the multifaceted nature of this crisis. While we acknowledge the complexity of the issues, it's crucial to approach them with a collaborative spirit and an open mind. You'll be surprised to learn that we don't have all the answers. The process of navigating through the crisis is a journey of learning for all of us. Our goal is to share insights, challenge preconceptions, and ultimately contribute to finding viable solutions By engaging in this process together, we can pave the way for more effective interventions and support for our migrants. I also want to note that we're not making any political statements by engaging in this work. Rather, like the Good Samaritan, we are addressing the immediate needs of those who have become our neighbors. We are joining God who watches over aliens and strangers, and we are hoping to hear Jesus say to us at the end of the age, "I was a stranger and you welcomed me." So before we dive into our session with the panelists and hear from our amazing women who are at the forefront of addressing these challenges, I want to introduce you to Sloma, JAMLAC's Immigration Director and co-founder. Sloma is going to provide us with an overview of this issue and the primary factors driving the current migrant crisis. We're looking to understand how socioeconomic conditions, political instability, and environmental challenges contribute to the surge in migration. So, take it away, Sloma.
Thank you so much, Steve and Esteban. And I want to thank you all for joining us today. I wish I would have been seeing your faces and in person. So I hope everybody's safe and warm. And so before we dive into this very important topic, I just want to start off with just a brief overview on what is happening with migration and the current migrant crisis. And I do say a brief overview because I think that this topic, an overview would take hours and hours, but I do want to touch on some of the more important things. So I want to start off with saying migration happens every day. Every day, people migrate for different reasons. Some people, maybe a lot of people here today joining us have left the city they were born in and grew up in, or have moved to another state, another city. Some people have left to another country for different reasons, job opportunities, for economic opportunities, and also for family reunification. But every day, there are people in this world that have to make a really difficult decision to leave their homes behind to search for a safer and a better life for them and their family. And so I want to touch on some of those topics today, some of the major push topics, and I think these are well-known causes that we've all heard. There's political instability, why people leave their country, socioeconomic reasons, civil unrest, conflict, violence, environmental changes or natural disasters, and policy decisions all impact why a person would leave. So we have seen a surge in migrants from South America recently. However, they are not the only group that are coming to the US in high numbers. So we have seen an increase of migrants from Haiti who are still suffering from the 2010 earthquake, as well as gang warfare. And I think maybe recently in the news, there's something blowing up in Haiti as well right now, or increasing. We will see an increase in migrants from Haiti in the next few months. As well, we are seeing people from Cuba, an increase of people from Cuba that are coming into the country who are still struggling with an unstable economy and a repressive government. But the largest group of migrants that we have seen come from South America, specifically from Venezuela. So I want to talk a little bit more on Venezuela and basically the fact that their economy has imploded. And there have been years in the making. This is not something that just happened overnight, but it has been years that have led of the economy imploding, leads to political instability, which has led to socioeconomic issues as well as violence. So the political instability is the root cause. And so there is a significant increase in organized crimes. They're gaining power, and they are basically using that power every day to go after people who are trying to survive every day. There are people who are protesting against the current administration who are unfortunately experiencing executions, short-term forced disappearances, they're jailing opponents, they're prosecuting civilians, torturing detainees, and crackdown on protesters who are trying to fight for their life to basically live, their right to live. The inflation has caused, this is a staggering number, has caused 19 million people to suffer from food shortage and lack of access to adequate health and a livable wage. So that is what has been experienced in Venezuela. An estimated 9.3 million Venezolanos are suffering from food insecurity. The healthcare system doesn't have access to healthcare workers. They don't have access to medicine. And so all of this is causing people to flee. More than 7.7 million have fled the country. This has generated one of the largest migrant crises in the world. 6.5 million Venezolanos have relocated throughout Latin America and the Caribbean. So it's important to know that US is not the only country that is feeling the surge. Colombia, who is a bordering country, as well as Peru and other parts of the world are also experiencing the surge of receiving Venezuelans. And then I want to talk about policy. Policy is huge. I want to discuss a policy that was placed in Venezuela in 2018 by their government. The US had sent humanitarian aid, food, clothes, medicines for them, for the people that were suffering there. And unfortunately, when the humanitarian aid arrived at the Colombian and Venezuelan border, it was blocked. It was blocked by the president, who said, we are not beggars and we don't need anyone's help. That type of policy has impacted the people in Venezuela. Some of the US policies, there are two that I want to quickly touch on. So one, I think you've maybe heard or have not, but Title 42 was a policy that was placed, as well as Remain in Mexico. And these two policies were placed during a little bit before, during, and after the pandemic. That has greatly impacted basically asylum seekers, people that were coming to our borders to seek refuge and safety. And so these two policies, one of them, the Title 42 specifically, ended in May of 2023. That's less than a year ago. Okay, and also this policy specifically, what it did is it gave authority to federal officials to now allow people to come into the country if it was to protect the country from contagious disease or spreading of contagious disease. That just recently last year was ended, that policy. And then the Remain in Mexico policy was in October of 2022. That policy ended then. And that forced basically asylum seekers who have come to our borders to stay in Mexico, regardless if they were Mexican nationals or not. They had to remain in Mexico to wait while their asylum application, their process was gone through the system. What did these two policies do? They basically prevented asylum seekers from coming into the country, seeking international protection. It placed them in border towns along Mexico, exposing them to killings and violence, sex assault, and other violent crimes. These policies did not deter immigration. It did not deter people from attempting to cross or recross into the United States. And then finally, I want to talk about our broken immigration system. We have a broken immigration system. There are not many lawful ways for people to come into the country. And that's just the reality of it. And even the lawful ways for people to come in are extremely difficult to obtain. So in response to the migrant crisis, the current administration has found ways to provide lawful entries and options for people to come to the US. And I will review some of those options later in the discussion.
All right, thank you, Sulma, for that great overview. As we can see, it's an extremely complex problem that has a lot of implication, and it also has a lot of causes that come in and take this effect. So with that, I do want to go ahead and introduce the rest of the panelists, and that way so we can get this conversation started and get you guys that great information that we're here to share today in the Newcomers Crisis Brief and Lunch and Learn. So first, as you just heard from her, we have our attorney, Sulma Mendoza. She's the JAMLAC co-founder and immigration director. We also have Michelle Warren, JAMLAC board member, a national faith leader, an advocate, an author, and a speaker. We have from the city, we're really happy to have Melissa Burton. She's a JD, and she is from the Denver Office of Migrant and Refugee Affairs. And last but not least, we have a Christian who is a Venezuelan father He is an HVAC technician and one of many Jamlac clients who Jamlac has helped over these last few years. So with that, again, thank you all for being here. Cristian, gracias por estar con nosotros. Acabo de introducir a todas las panelistas que van a estar discutiendo esta crisis. Y bienvenido de verdad. Okay, so with that, we're going to begin our panel discussion portion of today's event. And we have 4 pre-selected questions we're going to ask the panelists. And at the end, we will do a Q&A session. So please, if you have some questions, go ahead and start putting them in the chat. We have part of the team that's going to go ahead and do some of the vetting, and we'll have those at the end, and we'll take you all through that. So again, please post them in the chat. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and start with you, Sulma. Again, thank you for sitting here and discussing this with all the people that are online in this nice and chilly day, like I mentioned before, but let's get started. So you gave us a broad overview of everything that's happening, right? And why and some of the causes, but can you explain, I'm from Colombia, and a lot of people seem to bucket immigrants into like this one specific group, like we're all the same. All the immigrants, just do it this way, right? So can you expand on the differences and legal challenges between the recent South American migrants and other migrants in the US? I know you touched on it slightly, but give us a little bit more specificity. And specifically, we also want to hear about the work permits, the different types of legal statuses, like CBP1, TPS, or parole. Please.
Absolutely. And so thank you so much for that question. The way that it feels like there's like three questions in one. And so I want to start off with saying one of the biggest differences and challenges in working with the recent newcomers and other immigrants who have been in the US for a long time is the options for applying for immigration benefits. That is the biggest difference. And I cannot emphasize enough that the way somebody comes into the country greatly impacts the options that they have to ask for immigration benefits. It's significant. And so what I want to talk about first is basically we have heard these terms and they're interchangeable. People have heard CBP1, people have heard humanitarian parole, or just parole. That is 3 in 1. It is the exact same thing. And so I want to talk about what CBP1. CBP1 is basically a mobile app that was created by CBP, and CBP is a Custom and Border Patrol. They're the ones who patrol our borders, sorry. And they are the ones who basically assess whether somebody can come into the country or not. And so the CBP1 is a mobile app that migrants wanting to come into the US, get on the mobile app and they apply for humanitarian parole. The migrants who apply, they are outside of the US. They have to go through a process. So they apply for an appointment, they make the application, they have to wait for an appointment that could take weeks, sometimes months. Again, during this time, they're waiting outside of the US. They have to attend their appointment. And I want to mention that basically they are vetted and they have to pass a background check as well. They're fingerprinted and their pictures are taken and they're placed into the system. And so that is the process of requesting a CBP1 humanitarian. So what is humanitarian? Basically, it allows a person to lawfully enter into the US for a temporary presence. Okay, it's very temporary. It does provide a protection from removal during the time that they have this parole. And in certain circumstances, they're allowed to apply for a work permit. And so that leads to that conversation. As to, there's a question out there, why are they allowed to get work permits if they just came to the US? That is why. They went through a process, they applied, they were granted parole, and that allows them to be able to get a work permit. I do want to mention humanitarian parole is not a permanent status. It does not lead to a permanent status. It does not allow for derivative benefits. And what that means is that they can apply for family members. And it's not a way for them to bypass the immigration system. This is not like a loophole. So it's important to know that. They still have to go through proper procedures to ask for other type of benefits. And so it's important to kind of know that there is one junction in the parole that does allow some groups of people to eventually apply for permanent status, but it's very selective. Okay, so not everybody is able to apply for that. I also want to mention that humanitarian parole is not a new concept. We have used this throughout the history. One way that we've used it is in 1975. We used this humanitarian parole under Operation New Life to allow people leaving Vietnam to be able to come into the US, humanitarian. We also used it in Operations Pacific Haven in 1996 in response to the withdrawal from Iraq. So we've used the system for that as well. We just recently used it to resettle tens of thousands of people from Afghanistan. They were all brought in through humanitarian parole. That is also one of the process. And we also used it, and is still currently being used for the Central American Minors Program. And that is for children from the Triangle, Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, who are able to come in minors so that they're reunited with parents and that they don't have to do the dangerous cross to come to the US. So that is kind of what the CBP-1 humanitarian program. And then I want to talk about TPS, which is temporary protected status. And that basically, again, is temporary. It's a temporary immigration status, which provides certain people from certain countries who aren't able to go back to their country for a variety of reasons. And so they're allowed to stay in the US. What's the benefits? Protection from being deported to their country for a temporary time. They're allowed to apply for a work permit as well. And they also have the option to apply for them to be able to travel outside of TPS, the temporary protected status, does not lead to a permanent status as well. It's valid for 2 years. They have to keep renewing it every 2 years. And they are only allowed to register for a certain amount of time. I'll go a little bit more into that because it gets complicated with dates and who can apply and who can't. The TPS is not guaranteed. It's up to our government to decide if they're going to designate that country to continue to receive TPS. So let's say our government says, you know what, we're not going to have this country have TPS designation in. But what happens to the people that had TPS? They go back to the status they had before TPS. So a lot of people won't have any lawful status. Currently, there's 16 countries designated for TPS. And so that's what I want to talk about, the differences and challenges with working with newcomers and also people who have been in the US for many years. So I'll give an example. So for CBP-1, who just came to the US, went through the program, they're able to get a work permit. And so we're able to apply for the work permit for them to work in the country lawfully. Again, I want you all to know it is limited. The work permit that is granted to them is limited to max 2 years. Unless they get reparoled, they will not be able to renew that work. So it's a very temporary status. Another example for TPS, I'll go more in detail. If a person from Venezuela entered the United States before July 31st of 2023 and have lived in the US since October 3rd of 2023, they're allowed to be able to qualify for TPS. Now, anybody coming after July 31st, they do not qualify for TPS. They do not qualify for TPS, as well as the ability to register for TPS or apply for TPS ends in April of next year. What does that mean? That means if the person is unable to submit the application before that day and that day passes, they will not be able to request TPS as well. And then finally, I want to talk about asylum. If a newcomer comes to the US and asks for asylum, they must pass a credible fear interview. If they pass that interview, then they are able to proceed with applying for asylum. As a person who wants to apply for asylum, they must file their asylum application within. And I do want to say one thing. Everyone that comes to the border, whether they're doing the CBP-1, requesting asylum, and qualify for TPS, all of them, if they've had contact with our Border Patrol, they're automatically placed into removal proceedings. They're placed into deportation proceedings. they all will have to go to court and fight their case. And so that is a little bit of what the challenge is. There's some options for people, there's some options not for people. But I think it's important to know that the two options right now for people who are newcomers is CBP1, TPS, or asylum. So those are the three major things that they're able to apply.
Well, Sulma, that's again, there's so many nuances and avenues and ways in which a lot of the immigrants get processed and they come to the border. So, but I want to make something clear, or maybe you can clarify this for all of us that aren't necessarily, or relate to all these terms. But so the people entering, are they coming in legally or illegally? Are these considered legal ways to come into the country?
So the CBP1 is considered a lawful entry because they have applied and they've passed a background check and they've been vetted by CBP officers. Seeking asylum is both legal under our US Constitution and our international law. In order for a person to request asylum, they have to be in the US. So they have to be here. They have to come to our border or be present at a port of entry to be able to ask for asylum. And they are lawful ways to be able to come into the country.
Okay. And they're definitely provided due process under US law, correct?
That's exactly right. And so everyone, as I mentioned, everybody is in immigration court, deportation proceedings, now known as removal proceedings. And so every person that has contact has the right under the Fifth Amendment to a fair trial, a fair hearing. And so they're all allowed to make their claim, their case to an immigration judge. And so they are allowed due process.
Thank you, Sulma, for all that explanation. And again, for taking us through some of the different phases and the different types of cases we see. And I'm assuming, this is the tip of the iceberg for this giant of an immigration system that we have. And you mentioned that, it's got its challenges and it might be broken. And maybe, Michelle, is there anything you wanted to add to that? Do you want to expand more on any particular topic that Sulma mentioned?
Yeah, I think, first of all, Sulma, thank you. It really is hard to take such a complicated legal system, the immigration system, and try to condense it into about 10 minutes. What I'm going to try to do is actually make it even bigger picture to try to explain a lot of the conversations we have in our country around immigrants in general. So I'll try my best in a short period of time. I guess I would start by saying we have immigration laws and we have rules. And immigration, as Sulma had mentioned, it's very dynamic. This isn't just people coming to our borders. This isn't just a couple people or a couple groups of people that are moving. Migration just happens. That is the part of being human, to move. And so countries like the United States, you'll often hear within the context of talking about immigration, well, we're a country of laws. Yes, we are a country of laws. And we have a lot of laws on the books that help regulate the flow of who can come in and who can't come in. Because immigration is, so I'll just say immigration and the movement of people is very dynamic. It is always changing. Our immigration laws in our country are not dynamic. They don't respond and expand to economic needs, to different people groups, etc. And so it's really important to understand that we have laws. They are the reason that we refer to a broken immigration system is because they're very outdated. The way that we do immigration is 50, 60, 70 years old. There's three major pieces or at times in federal immigration law where our country was forming. Now was time to begin to regulate our borders for a lot of reasons. Safety is a primary reason. I mean, that's part of being, Esteban, you talked about being in the armed forces. That's one of the roles of government, is to keep people within their borders safe. And so the US government, as it was forming, really decided to begin to weigh in 1882 was the very first time we ever saw federal legislation on immigration. That was the Chinese Exclusion Act. It was specifically targeted towards a certain people that we weren't going to allow that certain people group to come in. As you move through immigration and law, another big push was during 1924 and 25, where the US government established a quota system, that there was going to be certain quotas. And what they realized over time was not only was it not dynamic enough to meet the needs of people who are coming to our shores, but that it was very, I'll just say, it gave preference if you were English, German, or Irish. And so we saw about 70, 80% of those quotas went to people from those countries, and the rest of the world had to share. And so people were moving from Italy, from Greece, and so many other countries, not just from Europe, but a lot from Europe during that time. And they realized, okay, so in 1965, a lot of things are happening as far as awakening and the way we're pursuing different people groups. And that turned our immigration system into what we call a number system. So the law was saying, okay, now we're going to have an equal number from different countries. And that was a great idea, but it didn't take into account that it took a lot farther and it was a lot more expensive from different countries, that migration probably up close to our borders with Mexico and South America, that we probably should be a little more dynamic. So the reason I bring up those three isn't to complicate it, but just to share that we have outdated mechanisms for how we do immigration law. In 1996 and beyond, what we've seen with Congress, and that's who makes the laws, votes on the laws, and puts them in statute, we've only seen laws that have punishment, not necessarily opportunity, which kind of gets into that word of justice, even that biblical word justice. Maybe I'll touch on that in another question or two when we talk about the Bible and Christian faith. But all to say, we've seen a lot of what I would say is more reactions in punitive punishments, really harsh punishments, actually, if you're here without papers, if you cross. I mean, there's a lot to say about that law. So we have, like I said, a lot of laws in our book. We also have a lot of rules and some leeway within the executive branch. So I was just talking about Congress. It's really hard for a whole group of people to decide to vote in a supermajority and agree with the House and the Senate to change laws. And that's one of the reasons we have a broken immigration system, is the politics have been really challenging, and they've always been challenging. It isn't the last 5 years, 10 years. I mean, I personally have been working on comprehensive immigration reform for 22 years. So, and I haven't seen what I hope for, but I'm still working on it.
Yeah.
So
Hey,
let's go to the laws. Yeah.
That's you touched on kind of, you know, the pattern we've been talking about, the complexities and the avenues, and then the ways of changing what we're currently facing is definitely through policy. But there's definitely, you know, that action that the U.S. has taken, and it comes from maybe from where we stand and where we've done things in the past. And just based on that, I wanted to move into the morality piece and the religious piece that you talked about a little bit, in the Christian faith, right? JAMLAC is a Christian-based organization, right? It's a faith-based organization. And with that, the Christian faith, you know, calls upon its followers to act with compassion and justice in the face of some of these global challenges. And this is a national challenge as well. So with that context, in the context of the ongoing migrant crisis, which has affected countless lives across the world, like you mentioned, as Sulma mentioned, Colombia, all these other countries, Afghanistan, which I've unfortunately have seen, you know, myself. So how should we as followers of Christ respond to the needs and hardships of these migrants and refugees? And this is going to be a longer question, but are there specific teachings or verses in the Bibles that can guide us to offer support, you know, to show love, to advocate for the rights and dignities of the people that are going through all of these trials and tribulations? And can these scriptural principles inform our actions and attitudes that we should have towards all these people?
Yeah, I definitely want to answer that. Before I head that, let me just share that the rules are flexible, and that's how we have things like asylum and parole and temporary protection actually comes from. I mean, maybe it's not a personal Christian faith. As a country, we wouldn't necessarily want that with the separation of church and state, but in compassion to things like earthquakes, in compassion to unsettled governments, actually globally, we all came together after World War II and said, hey, if anybody has to move across borders because of oppression, because of political ideology or religious persuasion. So think about after World War II, you've got just so much had been decimated through Hitler. And if you weren't a certain, if you were Jewish, that's a religious persecution. If you didn't agree with the Nazis, that's a political. And the global response to that created really the asylum laws that we practice globally today. So the United States says you can come to our border and request sanctuary. And you can prove to us why, if you return to your country of origin, you would suffer, be incarcerated, you wouldn't be able to work, you would die. So that's the whole legal piece. But that actually came from a learned, wise experience. Like, people should not be stuck within their borders and suffer not just personal kind of persecution, but even up to death, that we need to have compassion. And so I'll just say that our asylum laws are a response to compassion, to the acknowledgement that people are going to have crisis. And whether it is small town crisis or big global crisis because of dictatorships, et cetera, we need to be receiving. And so that's sort of the mechanism is one of compassion. When you look at the Christian faith, which is, the faith orientation of JAMLAC's leadership, and also you mentioned, Catholic Charities and Lutheran Family Services, we all share the teachings of the Bible. And the Bible is very clear from beginning to end. It's not just an Old Testament thing, it's not just a New Testament thing, but the spirit of hospitality and recognizing that there are destabilizations that happen that need extra attention. So in the Old Testament, you often will hear things about what we call, or I'll just say Nick Wolterstorff, who's a Yale professor who talks a lot about justice and God's justice. He talks about the quartet of the vulnerable: the widow, the orphan, the poor, and the immigrant. And the reason the Old Testament has so much to say about it is because they're very vulnerable people. If you are moving and you are changing culture and you're moving into a different country, chances are you probably don't have people there, or even if you do, they may be immigrants themselves. You don't own land, you don't have a command of the culture, you don't have social connections, you don't have language, and then you add the reasons that you've left or have had to leave, and all of the trauma and even just the exhaustion of having to flee, that makes you vulnerable as an immigrant. I won't go into the widow and the orphan and the poor, but you can imagine, if you begin to think within those contexts, that vulnerability is something that the Christian faith is supposed to, but one, recognize, and then two, respond to. So there's a lot of laws in the Old Testament about how you're supposed to pay attention, be aware, meet the needs. There's the prophets, which probably are more pages than any section of the Bible, with the warnings if you don't. And then you move into the New Testament, where we're introduced to Jesus, the birth of Jesus during a time of a lot of political upheaval, so much so that Jesus is born in Bethlehem, where his family lineage is, but things are happening. There's a threat to baby boys under 2 are going to be murdered. He's a baby boy, he's under 2. It literally was put out there because of the fear of his birth at that time. And he and his family flee and cross borders to Egypt. And all of a sudden, the Holy Family is a refugee because there's time you need to move.
Right. So Michelle, so migration is something that's been happening throughout history. It's something that definitely touches, on a global scale, as you've mentioned. So we've talked about the laws, how they're written to address these issues. We've talked about, the Christian-based concept of, since JAMLAC is this type of organization, but we're dealing with this locally, right? We're dealing with this in Denver. And so very specifically, one of the cities that's being more impacted by this. So I want to move on to Melissa. Welcome. I know you've been listening to us for a little bit now. And so we want to know how is Denver planning to ensure this support or the sustainability of the newcomer programs in the face of such a challenging political landscape, right? We have elections and many things coming up, and then also challenging funding landscapes. I'm sure that the city deals with these type of restraints or constraints from time to time. So can you highlight key strategies for adapting to these changes, including any partnerships that you've done, locally in Denver, and then innovative funding models that might help with these essential services in the city?
We've got to love those multi-part questions, right? But thank you.
I got to throw it all out so that you can, that way
Yes.
you have a lot to talk about and share with us.
Exactly. on a Thursday snow day of all days.
On a
But
Thursday.
I'm very happy to be with you all. And just like a quick intro. So my name is Melissa Burton. I'm an immigration policy analyst with the Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs with the city and county. So just want to make sure you all can hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Excellent. Wonderful. So like with that question, Esteban, I would preface by saying that like while the spotlight has been on the situation that's unfolding at the U.S. southern border and responding to the needs of newcomers, migration is not new, to Suma's earlier point. We have a longstanding community of immigrant refugee residents in the city and county of Denver, including tens of thousands of individuals who are undocumented or lack an immigration status. So I think it's important to sort of like level set the conversation there to know this is not our first time at the rodeo. This is not our first time experiencing or going through the welcoming process, if you will. Denver is familiar with diversity because it is who we are. It is all of the individuals, all of the residents that make up the city and county. So I think one of the ways that the city is ensuring at least this continued support and sustainability, again, not just for newcomer programs, but all of our immigrant and refugee residents, is by making the issue a priority, right, across various agencies' programming and services to include our own. So one example I'll give is that the city recently hired a very much long-awaited newcomer program director within Denver Human Services, whose sole focus actually will be the short and long-term success of the newcomer program, or our self-described newcomer program. But another way really that the city is ensuring kind of this continued support or sustainability is I'd be remiss not to like name our own office, the Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs, and also just the agency that we're housed under, which is the Agency for Human Rights and Community Partnerships, and the work that has been going on in both of those places. So just speaking for our office specifically, we were founded in 2005. So we've been around for a minute. And we are not a direct services provider. However, what we have been doing since that time and to date is really serving as a bridge for residents who identify as immigrant refugees in the city and county of Denver, and local government and agencies like the that provide those services, but also nonprofit partners, our legal service providers, to include JAMLAC, and just other agencies that like maybe don't have always a full understanding of what the needs of immigrant refugee populations are, but they offer those services. And so then it becomes our task really to be a bridge or a connection point so that these residents are aware of what is available or accessible to them. And that is definitely a priority for us, and continues to be. Now, in the context of the migrant response or newcomer response with the launch of like legal workshops. And that really at this point in time has sort of no end date or definitive end date, but being able to connect individuals to immigration legal services specifically, whether it's through work authorization, whether it's through in the long-term temporary protected status or asylum or other processes. That is another key way that the city has sort of leaned in recently, again, to kind of ensure, a system of support that is sustainable both in the short term and the long term. And when you ask about or talk about, Esteban, like kind of sort of the key strategies for adapting to change, right? Whether it's political or financial, because we're experiencing both, and TBD on what's to come in 2025. I think one of those ways really has been to leverage existing relationships that you have with other partners, and who cover various areas of expertise, because it is those partners, or it is those relationships that will carry the work forward, that will move it forward, and that will ensure that it exists. But it is also ensuring that not all of the workload or the burden, for lack of a better term, falls on just one organization, right, or one partner. It is very much a collaborative effort. And that requires leveraging relationships. I think another kind of key strategy is sort of how we get creative around funding, and it's really potentially leaning on our philanthropic partners for that support, but not to the extent of, hey, partner, here are all of the things that we need your help with. But even if it requires narrowing the focus of like, here are the specific pockets: immigration, legal services, housing, medical needs, education, job skills training, all of the buckets that an operation or like a mission really encompasses, and having a dedicated partner or partners devoted to a given bucket, if you will. So that way, again, it is not sort of the obligation or the duty or the task of a given philanthropic partner, for example, to take on or to feel that they're taking on all of the load, all of the buckets, but really kind of having that driven focus so that all of the areas are addressed. And those are just sort of just quick tidbits in terms of what those strategies can look like. But when I mean also leveraging relationships, it is really talking about also keeping the conversation going, working to do some myth busting, as Suma has helped do today, as far as explaining why exactly are people coming? How are they entering? And as a result of how they're entering, what options are before them? Because to her point, like, it is not a blanket response or blanket answer for everyone across the board. And so having that understanding to begin with then leads to more questions about, okay, well, then what are the possibilities? And that is one of the things that I would say the city is asking: what are the possibilities for the individuals who are currently being served? And how can the city sort of facilitate those connection points to opportunity? And as of late, it has definitely been a focus on work authorization.
Hi, Melissa. So you're pointing to some clear, it takes a village, right? It takes a lot of coordination. It takes partnerships with different organizations that tackle different type of problems that are being faced, right? So with that, then how are the workshops, I guess, since we're jam, this is Jamlec based right now, at least for this conversation that we're having. So how are the legal workshops and the support services impacting the lives of the immigrants and refugees that are coming? And a key piece that I guess I do want to hear is, when they reach some of these permits and these legal authorizations, like, how does that actually impact their lives, and does that help them get inserted into the community and become productive? I think that's a key area that we want to hear about for sure.
Sure, absolutely. But first, I want to underscore that these legal workshops, at least for the city-led, because there is also a state coordinated effort happening in tandem, I'd want to underscore that they're not possible without partners like Jamlec, and without the volunteers, and city staff, and just, passionate individuals who want to support this cause because they see and understand the purpose. So I want to make sure that I highlight that point. But when you ask about, how exactly are these legal workshops or support services directly impacting individuals? It's both a lifeline and an access point, in short. It's a lifeline because I don't think it's lost on any of even, our US citizen friends on the call that, a job is long-term sustainability and self-sufficiency. Without a job, there is no livelihood. And so through these work authorization clinics or these legal workshops where individuals are connected to, a work permit, albeit temporary, but it is a work permit. It's a starting point for those individuals to be able to obtain a job. But I call it also an access point because it's not just about employment. It is also then about identification, and specifically, a driver's license or a state ID, a library card, other forms of identification, which then lead to access to other local services, including city services and programming, whether that's rent utility assistance, whether that's eviction support services, whatever the case may be. Many of those programs or services may require not necessarily an immigration status, but some form of identification. And many individuals, and in particular, new arrivals as of late from both South and Central American countries, they may not always have that form of identification. And so to then be connected to a process that enables them to then obtain employment, but also that identification gets the ball rolling on so many other things. So, if I'm putting it all under a single umbrella, it's about integration, right? It's about, if Melissa or if Steve is moving to like a new state, you're sort of starting all over again in terms of navigating how you familiarize yourself with your new environment, and where all of the various services that you may want to take advantage of are and what's required to obtain them. So that is how I would say it's made a huge impact for the individuals that are receiving this support. It's putting folks on the map in a meaningful way and in a practical way as well, and keeping them, I would say it's all about public safety as well, quite frankly, is giving those individuals that sense of security and stability in their new environment, because they can now get a job, or they now have a temporary or permanent, what have you, immigration status.
Yeah, I think anybody that's moved, even just within the United States, knows that having a support system is crucial to get started. Now, imagine the added extreme difficulty of coming from another country. You don't know the language, and I mean, it's exponential for sure. And so I do want to thank the three of you. For now, you're not going anywhere. Stay right here. Please stay right here. But I do want to move on to one of Jamlec's clients. His name is Christian. And I'm going to switch to a little bit of Spanish just to introduce him, to have him know that we want to hear from his story, because it's important to also know the direct impact that it's having on individuals and families like his. So, Cristian, muy buenas tardes. Queríamos empezar contigo o pasarnos, dedicarnos a hablar contigo un poco sobre tu historia, pero antes de que haga eso, voy a hacer la pregunta en inglés para que la gente que está en línea entienda lo que vamos a hablar, para que todos podamos entender. Y después voy a volver a hablar contigo y te la voy a hacer en español, ¿vale? Okay, so pretty much what I said, I want to ask the question. I'm going to say it in English first, just so we all know what we're going to ask him, and then he's going to share his story, and I'll try to translate. So, we've heard a lot about the legal aspects and understood the reasons behind the crisis, from an external viewpoint, because we're here, so we didn't live it directly. But we want to hear directly from you, Cristian, your perspective as a migrant, how you would explain the migration crisis, hear a little bit of your story, and then know what motivated you to do and take up on this long and dangerous journey, and to hear more about your travels. Okay, Cristian, hemos escuchado mucho sobre el aspecto legal y hemos entendido muchas de las razones de las crisis externas e internas, pero lo estamos viendo desde el punto de vista de nosotros. Pero ahora queremos escuchar directamente de ti. Queremos saber desde tu perspectiva como migrante, que nos expliques cómo ves tú la crisis migratoria, que nos cuentes un poco de tu historia, que sabemos que tú eres una persona que es especializado en un trabajo específico en Venezuela, que no vienes sin necesariamente saber nada, pero que tienes una especialidad. Y cuéntanos sobre por qué te embarcaste en este viaje tan peligroso. And Donovan, I don't know if you can unmute him if he's not able to, please. Cristian, todavía estás en mute, ¿no puedes quitarle el mute, por favor? Ahí está. Otra vez. Ahí. No. Hey, Donovan, let him see if he can do it on his own. Cristian, ¿puedes intentarlo otra vez, una vez más? No está funcionando. Okay, Cristian, no hagas nada. Donovan, try it one more time. See if we can maybe get it working this time around. All right, so Cristian, no te da, inténtalo una vez más, es el botoncito del micrófono en la parte de arriba, cuando tocas la pantalla. Si no, so in the meantime, while Christian is trying that, I do want to highlight that Christian is somebody that has a family that they came from Venezuela to the United States through an extremely difficult journey, across the Darien Strait with his family, with two children, and that they experience extreme hardships just to get here. And him and his wife are not, I think sometimes people generalize about the people that are coming over to the United States, and we're talking about somebody that's an HVAC technician and it's somebody that's an expert in the trade that can apply some of these specialties when they come to the United States, because it's things that we need all around. And then his wife is also somebody that was studying psychology in Venezuela, and hopefully this is somebody that we can start integrating into the United States as well, and that they can have a success story based on all the work and efforts that the city and organizations like JAMLAC are putting together. And it looks like we're still having some technical difficulties.
Yeah, we can only ask him to unmute himself, but we can't unmute for him.
Okay. Y Cristian, entonces no ves arriba al lado de donde está el botoncito de la cámara, el botoncito de mute, no le puedes, así le hagas. Ahorita te salió que sí lo pudiste hacer. No se te escucha nada. ¿Por qué no? A way to call in.
Yeah.
Okay, so while we get back to Christian's story, because we definitely want to hear from him and from his family, I think that's really important. We're going to go ahead and move for just a little bit into the other organizations that are here supporting the newcomers in the community. So we'll take a couple of minutes to hear from each of these organizations if they are online. And I want to, if you could please just raise your hand, we'll give you about 1 minute each. And organization like TANA. So if TANA is on, we'll go ahead and start with them, and then we'll touch on the next one after that.
We have someone raising their hand. Tana's not on right now. She's coming in person to the next one.
Okay, so who do we have raising their hand? If you can unmute yourself and please go ahead and give us about a minute about your organization and what your group is doing.
Hi, my name is Junuen Cisneros, and our organization is Public Education Business Coalition. And what we have seen is that a lot of these immigrants come here with a lot of education, and it's very hard for them to find a job. So in our organization, what we do is help them get their license to become teachers. Many of them have been teachers in their countries, but coming here, the English was a kind of a problem if they didn't speak English, and also the school system and everything is different here. So we decided to create the New American Pathway. We joined forces with Spring Institute, and we are creating an English language acquisition that is going to be more academic, so they can be ready for then the following year to get the residency. And we are applying for more grants to give them a full rounded support, not just for the person who wants to become a teacher, but for the whole family. And we also have another partnership with Advanced CDU, that if they don't have a college degree and they want to become teachers, they can enter to this organization, to Advanced CDU, and they can get their bachelor's degree. And the majority of the people qualify for scholarships. So that's what we are doing at Public Education Business Coalition. And we are our alternative teacher licensure program. And also we do policy to help teachers and students get the resources they need, and so many more things. So that is what we are doing now.
Thank you very much, Junuen, for sharing that with all of us on the call. And I think I also saw a raised hand from Lori Huertas.
Hi, everyone. So sorry, I'm working from home today, so I'm not dressed as formal, but it's nice to meet everyone. So we've been helping in a couple of different ways. So I am the director of program impact at Focus Points. We are located in the GES area, 80216. So we actually had someone part-time helping the migrants do documentation on whether or not if they wanted to stay in Denver, helping them, find a place to live. We also teach English to refugees. So we teach English virtually and teach English in person at the Mango House. So if any of them qualify for that, we've been doing that in an effort, especially for those that want to stay, to help them gain employment, as well as even if it wants to be a stay-at-home mom so that she can communicate with her teacher and provide that way. So we've been helping in that fashion. I teach part-time at MSU, and at MSU, they recently, and I could send the link or send the flyer if you put your email in the chat. They now have a program where immigrants, even undocumented, can take classes at MSU Denver.
Awesome. Lori, thank you for sharing that with us. And so what we're going to try to do so that we can hear from Christian is I'm going to put him on speaker. And so we're going to revert back to what we had originally planned. And then so we're going to talk to him that way. So Christian, ahora sí, cuéntanos un poquito sobre tu historia. Lo voy a tratar de poner aquí a ver para que lo puedan escuchar. Me dicen, can you guys hear? Christian, dale por favor.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias por permitirme reunirme con ustedes. Les cuento un poco. La crisis migratoria nos ha afectado mucho a todos los venezolanos. Oye, nos ha tocado salir corriendo de nuestro país.
Sí, can you guys, I want to just get confirmation that you guys can hear what he's saying so that I can translate a little bit.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Cristian, lo que voy a hacer es que cuando tú hables, yo voy a tratar de traducir un poco lo que tú estás diciendo. So
Okay.
what he's saying is that the situation in Venezuela has been very difficult, and they've been chased out, and they've had to embark on this journey. Continúa, por favor.
Oye, bueno, empecemos por Venezuela. Lo que es Venezuela. Venezuela es un país muy hermoso. ¿Para qué? Pero, oye, este gobierno nos ha hecho sufrir demasiado.
So Venezuela is he wants to start with saying that Venezuela is a beautiful country, but just this government has made it extremely difficult for us.
Yo soy técnico de refrigeración. Mi esposa, ella es estudiante de psicología. Y sin embargo, con todo que lo hemos intentado, se nos ha hecho muy difícil. Oye, un sueldo en Venezuela mensual es de $5 al mes.
And as I mentioned before, I'm a HVAC technician. My wife is a psychology student. We've tried everything to stay where we were at, but it's been made very difficult. And he's highlighting that the fact that the minimum wage in Venezuela is $5 a month.
Como para nosotros, como lo es para los estadounidenses aquí, una hamburguesa, nosotros comemos arepas. Y un kilo de harina pan cuesta $2.50. Un litro de aceite cuesta $5. Medio cartón de huevo, que serían 12 unidades, está en $4. ¿Crees que un sueldo de $5 mensuales puede alcanzar para comer?
So the other thing I want to highlight is that, like in America, you guys eat hamburgers. In Venezuela, we eat arepas. Familiar with arepas? Delicious. And just a pound of the corn flour that takes to make this costs $4. Eggs could cost up to $8. Milk is $8 a gallon, and based on the minimum wage, that's $5. How do you expect, or how can the government expect us to be able to live off of such a low minimum wage when the basic necessities are so expensive?
Un profesor cobra $5 mensuales no le alcanza ni siquiera para llegar a la escuela, para pagar pasajes para llegar a la escuela. Y mi hija estudiaba 2 días a la semana, de 12 de mediodía a 3:30 de la tarde. ¿Creerías tú que es justo eso para una niña que está empezando a vivir?
And so a teacher makes $5 a month. And just because of this, my daughter was only able to go to school twice a week to try to get all her learning done. And I just don't think it's fair for her or for anyone else to try to develop with these conditions. And it's just not fair to her, and it's not fair to any of us.
A eso le podemos sumar la corrupción. Yo tenía un puesto donde vendía helados, ice cream, y teníamos que pagar $100 semanales.
And to top this off, you have to add corruption to everything that's going on. We used to sell ice cream on the corners, and then we were being charged $100 a la semana. O al mes.
Sí, la semana.
We were being charged $100 a week to be able to operate where we were selling our ice cream.
Una organización delictiva creada por el mismo gobierno, se llaman colectivos.
And it's an organization created by the same government. They're called collectives. Those are the ones that are charging.
Y cuando no teníamos para pagar esa suma, porque era muy difícil con mi trabajo y con lo de los helados, era que medio sobrevivíamos. Cuando no teníamos para pagar esa suma de dinero, nos quitaban la mercancía.
And when we didn't have enough money to pay for this sums of money that they were asking for, because I used to supplement selling ice cream with my job, they would take away our merchandise, and we couldn't do anything else. They would just take our stuff away.
Perdimos el dinero del capital de nuestro negocio.
And we lost everything. We lost all the capital. We lost all the product from our business.
Y fue en el momento en que decidimos emprender el viaje.
And this was the reason why we really decided to embark on this journey.
No solo pensamos en Estados Unidos, pensamos en cualquier otro país donde pudiéramos escapar de eso, ¿sabes?
And we didn't just think about the United States. We thought about all the possibilities. We thought about any other places where we could escape from this situation.
Emprendimos el viaje. Fueron 5 meses.
It took us 5 months.
Bueno, todo empezó en la selva del Darién, Colombia, Panamá.
Yeah, it all started in Colombia. We went through the Darien Strait and the jungle towards Panama.
2 días y medio, lluvias intensas, caminatas fuertes. Uno de los jóvenes que venía con nosotros se rindió en el camino. Él falleció, se sentía demasiado mal, un dolor intenso en el estómago y falleció en el camino.
So 3 days crossing just that small area. It was all of us walking. We had a guy with us, a young man with us, that he just gave up along the way. His stomach started hurting, and he passed away when we were going through the jungles and the dense jungles.
En la selva de Panamá, los indios panameños robaban.
We encountered also a lot of theft along the way with some of the local populations in Panama.
El que no pagara la vacuna, como dicen ellos, no podía seguir caminando.
And then whoever didn't pay, they just wouldn't let him continue to keep walking and going through on their path forward.
Fueron 2 días y medio cargando a nuestras hijas en los hombros. Mi hija tiene 4 años, la mayor, y la menor tiene 2 años.
Yeah, and then it was all this, carrying my daughters in our shoulders. My youngest one is 2 years old, and my oldest one is 4. So we had to carry him through this entire journey.
Logramos llegar a Panamá, cruzamos, subimos. Uno de los países donde fue muy difícil fue Guatemala.
Another area and country that was very hard was Guatemala, as we went through her.
Llegamos a México. No me puedo quejar de México, un buen país, por lo menos la economía.
And then after that, we went to Mexico. It was, things weren't as bad. At least they treated us okay.
El país de México, conocí muchas personas, muy buenas personas, me ayudaron. Estuve 4 meses y medio, incluso ayudé a un amigo, le enseñé todo lo que sabía de mi profesión como técnico y él estaba aquí en México trabajando con la refrigeración.
And as a matter of fact, we spent 4 months in Mexico trying to continue to come through. And like I said, luckily I was treated well when I was there, and I met a friend, and I even taught him how to do all of my technical HVAC experience on my way here. Christian, una pregunta para ti. I'm going to ask Christian a quick question. ¿Cuáles son tus sueños y cuándo ya llegaste a los Estados Unidos después de esto?
Oye, primero que todo, quiero aprender el inglés. Eso es lo primordial. Oye, me encanta ese idioma.
Okay, so I asked him when he finally made it, and what are his dreams for coming to the United States. And he says the very first thing that comes to his mind is to learn English, that he loves this language and that he really wants to learn it.
Tengo unos muy buenos amigos americanos que me han tendido la mano, se puede decir así, con algunos trabajos por día, ¿sabes? En lo que ellos pueden ayudarme, porque aquí si uno no tiene el permiso de trabajo y algún tipo de papel, uno no puede trabajar.
And then he also said that he has a couple of good American friends here that have laid a hand and extended their hand to help him to get jobs, even if it's here and there, that helps him get some money, and that they've helped him to find some work, because without having a work permit or any of the documents required, it's tough to move on. Entonces, te hago otra pregunta. I'm going to ask him another question. So I'm going to ask him what it means to have this work permit. Entonces, Cristian, ¿qué significa para ti, para tu familia, tener un permiso de trabajo?
Oye, esa es la mejor oportunidad que me han dado, y de verdad muchísimas gracias. Le doy muchísimas gracias a Jamla. De verdad, oye, imagínate, te voy a ser sincero, ni siquiera tenía el dinero para mi permiso de trabajo, porque se me ha hecho un poco difícil, y ellos me brindaron esta ayuda.
Entonces, so he's saying that he's extremely grateful. It means everything. It means it all. And he said he's extremely grateful for Jamlek, and ¿y qué era lo otro que ibas a decir?
Que ya creo que en 2 semanas llega mi permiso de trabajo y mi seguro social, y incluso mis amigos americanos ya me consiguieron un empleo para cuando me lleguen mis papeles entrar.
Okay, and he's saying that he didn't even have the money to pay for any of the processing to get these papers, but he's really happy because he's hoping that they're going to come in about 2 weeks, and some of his American friends already have a job lined up for him, so that he can hit the ground running and get to work. So.
Y muy contento de estar aquí. Oye, la felicidad que siento es que mis hijas estén estudiando en un buen colegio toda la semana. Mi esposa quiere retomar sus estudios acá.
Qué bueno.
Yo, bueno, espero tener un buen trabajo y a lucharlo.
And he's just grateful. He's just grateful and happy that he's able to see his daughters actually go to a good school, to a school that they're there every day learning, and that his wife could even have the thought to continue her education. And then to him he's just extremely, extremely grateful. Cristian, muchísimas gracias por compartir con nosotros tu historia. Definitivamente es importante tener la perspectiva desde lo que ustedes han experimentado. Entonces, muchísimas gracias.
Claro que sí. Bueno, gracias a ustedes, gracias a Janla, que me ha apoyado muchísimo con eso. Oye, son 2 permisos y los 2 sociales de mis hijas, que okay. Si nos ponemos a ver acá ha sido mucho dinero, y oye, llegando aquí, tú lo debes saber porque tú eres de un país suramericano, ¿sí? Y bueno, tú sabes que este es el país de las oportunidades. Aquí vinimos a trabajar, a luchar bueno, por mi familia. Yo lo hice a luchar por mi familia.
I just said I want to thank Christian for telling us his story, and he says he's thankful. He wants to do it for the job. He wants to work. They want to work. Just having these 2 permits and doing everything else it takes money and it takes effort. And he's extremely grateful for the organizations that are helping him get through all of this. And he's also saying that I think I kind of understand, and I do, because we've been through some of that ourselves. So great conversation. Again, thanks for everybody that's been here. We're not done yet, but I do want to say that it's been a little bit over an hour now, and we want to continue that. But before anybody leaves the call, and I know that we have over 50 participants online, if you haven't done it, please, and if we don't have your information, or if Jamlec doesn't have your information, drop your email or your contact info in the chat. It's very important for us to continue to get these databases so that more of this information can continue to be shared and the information to be out there. You can also go to jamlec.org/migrant crisis and excuse me, and share this, and so that we can tell you about upcoming workshops, volunteer opportunities. We'll also announce an email with all these opportunities and information. And then again, we're going to take more questions until 1 p.m. So you're welcome to stay. And then I want to go back to see if we have one more of the organizations that we're going to introduce or talk about what they've been doing for the community for 1 minute. Do we have one more of those online? If you do, please raise your hand so we can identify you.
Andrea, do you want to just tell about what you guys have been doing, Andrea?
Totally. Hi, I'm Andrea Ryle. I'm a local mom here in Denver, and I kind of jokingly say, kind of a group of us accidentally started a movement in our city. We have, since early November, been really engaged as a mom and neighbor community right here in the Highlands, and it's really spread to Metro Denver now. We have members in Parker, Castle Rock, Summit County, kind of all over the place. But a lot of members right here in Denver, just highly engaged in the crisis in our city, the reasons that migrants are coming. We're walking side by side with them through what it is to be a migrant in America right now. And in the city of Denver, we have quickly mobilized to provide immediate physical needs, boots and soup and medicine for kids and coats and, the things that moms do when they see people who need help. And that quickly then turned into more advocacy with the city and beyond. We have big hopes to, gosh, like, where's rights to work in this moment? We really want to be pushing for rights to work to, for this population, for their good, but also for ours, to increase the economy here, for things to be safer in our city, access to driver's licenses, and a whole slew of things. But we also were feeding the encampment when it was there at 26 and Zunai, lunch and dinner every day. The feeding of encampments at I-70 and Pecos and beyond continues, the Elitch's encampment. Yeah, so I could go on and on and on. What I'm saying is the people in this city care. We want to see this population integrated well into our community. We're happy they're here, and we're going to keep fighting to help get them stable.
Thank you, Andrea, for your work, and for everybody, all the organizations. You can see this isn't just about what Jamlec is doing. It's a cohort. It's a huge conglomerate of different organizations and entities that are coming together to put all of this together. And so again, Jamlec is going to continue to share some of this information on their website and to the other communication venues that they have. So please, drop that information in there. You can also review the chat, and we'll continue to ensure that this information gets out there. So that this help can be taken advantage of and used and how it's supposed to. So with that, I'm going to bring the participants, the panel participants back, and ask a couple of more questions that we've received from you guys in the audience. And so if I can get Sulma back highlighted, I'm going to start with you. You mentioned that everybody gets due process, but is it true that it is still up to a judge to assess if that person is worthy of asylum? Meaning, the judge can assess if Venezuela as a country is bad enough for asylum or not? And is it likely for many of these folks that are coming over to get asylum to actually get accepted?
Yeah, so I mean, asylum is the option to be able to apply, and then you have to kind of prove your case. And so when I say due process, is they're allowed to present their case to an immigration judge. Honestly and unfortunately, I can speak a little bit about the Denver Immigration Court. I would say a little under 1% of asylum applications are approved, regardless of country. And so, although it's an avenue that they can pursue if you qualify, it's not a guarantee that they will be approved. Not only that, there is a backlog that is, I don't know. I mean, the backlog is outrageous before they even get to see a judge to be able to get a decision on the asylum application. I filed an asylum application in 2017 that I haven't received an answer on. I don't have a hearing. I mean, it's years and years. I would say one of the benefits of applying for asylum is that you can apply for a work permit 150 days after filing your application. And so people who are, the backlogs from USCIS and immigration courts still allow the asylum seekers to be able to get a work permit and be able to renew it until they get a final decision on their case. So although asylum is an option, I am very honest with the people that I talk to about asylum. It's very, very difficult to win.
Wow, that's again quite the intricate and complicated process, and the backlog seems to be pretty excessive. Switching topics a little bit, something that piqued my interest when we were talking to Christian, and some of the things that Michelle and you have brought up before is, and some of the organizations as well, there's people that are coming that are qualified to do many jobs, right? And so Melissa, I'm going to direct this one to you. Are there any recommended resources or things that these individuals can do to accelerate getting, maybe not proficient because they might be proficient in their specialty, but for them to use that in the community that they serve? Is there any resources for these highly skilled immigrants that we're getting, or a way to identify them and make this, a better situation?
Yeah, sure. I think on the immediate, I would share, and thank you for the question. I know L'Oreal already plugged a few resources, and I dropped a few in the chat as far as it relates to the city's Economic Development and Opportunity Office, and all of the kind of the connection points as far as, whether it's workforce training, but also to include highly skilled individuals in various industries or sectors to be able to have sort of a connection point through the city as far as next steps, or, in the course of their job search, whether it's just starting out, or folks who just need support searching or narrowing their focus on the search. They're kind of a good landing point for that. I did plug an interpreter workforce training opportunity that is available currently for individuals who might be interested in becoming licensed interpreters and that speak various languages. So there is a link in the chat related to that. And then kind of on a broader scale, the state has also offered opportunities. Michelle, you might be able to speak to that or something related. But one thing I do want to underscore and highlight is legislation, and I am not going off on a tangent here, but I want to underscore the fact too, in terms of individuals who are interested in professional licensure opportunities or registration, legislation exists in the state or at the local level so that individuals no longer have to verify their lawful presence in the United States in order to pursue certain professional licensures or certifications at the local level. So that's definitely something that is worth looking into. And I can drop the relevant links in the chat, but it is something for individuals who are thinking about, well, I want to be a plumber. I want to, be a nail technician. I want to open up my food truck, and kind of where to go for that. The city also has a Department of Excise and Licenses that would address those topics and information on those websites about opportunities. So it's just something to keep in mind for everyone.
Oh, thank you. Michelle, I saw you nodding your head like there was something you wanted to add. So maybe just a little bit before I move on to Sulma, do you have something to add with that, or maybe on a policy perspective from the state?
I'm not sure if you want me to weigh in. Let me just go quickly that Melissa, I'm really glad you added some of that stuff. There's also nonprofits that are assembling as well. And I'm wondering if Nikki can put that in the chat. I can look for it as well. But I think the recognition that people are getting work permits and they need to be connected to jobs. We have incredibly low unemployment and a desperate need for workers in Colorado. And so that's some of the big picture things that the state is looking at. One of the things to share about the JAMLAC clinics that we've run and that are continuing, one of the questions that we ask on the pre-screening is what job did you have in your country of origin, and what job do you hope you can be in? Because we're hopeful that people will be able to get connected with their skills to needs that we have in our workforce. And Colorado, especially around licensure, is very generous. I mean, that's one of the reasons you'd want to stay in Colorado, because your status is not a huge barrier to be able to obtain and use your licensure.
Thank you, Michelle, for that. And I'm going to close with Sulma. I know that there are a few more workshops and other information that's coming up. Can you share with everybody online who, where, and when these are going to take place?
Yes, of course. And so we are going to be hosting workshops through the month of June. We're hoping to be able to target 150 people at each workshop. And so we're going to put in the chat the dates. You can also get some of that information from Nikki or Marlene or on our website. So I do want to answer, this goes along with a question that I saw in the chat about getting information out about the workshops. So primarily we have been focusing on pre-screening and helping people who are in shelters. We felt that they were like the biggest need at the time to be able to get them out of the shelters. And so we are now basically with community partners is where we're getting them. And so with churches who have some of their new congregations that we know will qualify for the service. So we're connecting with other community organizations, we're doing churches, and we are still doing some with the shelter. And so we're hoping to do 150 people for each month for up until June.
Okay, great. Well, I do want to thank the panelists for embarking on this conversation with all of us today. For everybody online that joined, that's also, thank you. And hopefully this clears up a lot of, the myths and things that we hear out there in the news cycle and everything that's going on. And if not, at least it gives you some perspective for what's going on in the community, what's going on with the migrant crisis and the newcomers that are coming to our city and throughout the United States. And I do want to emphasize again for everyone, jamlac.org/migrant crisis. And I'm getting told here from the producers of our of the Lunch and Learn that there are additional details for those who prefer an in-person experience next time. There's going to be a second session on Wednesday, April 3rd, again from 11:30 to 1, kind of with a similar format that we did today. It's going to be at JAMLAC, and then the next employment authorization workshop is going to be March 22nd, and the April is to be determined. So again, thanks everybody for joining us today. That's all we have, and thank you for the amazing panelists and for sharing that really important information. Sulma, Michelle, Melissa, and Christian, muchas gracias por haber estado con nosotros.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Gracias.
Thank you so much for coming, everyone. Really, really appreciate it. Nice to see so many faces. Andrea, I can just answer your question. If you want to contact Alexis, they can get on the list to be pre-screened. She'll call them and see if they're even eligible before they come to pre-screening. And then they can come to pre-screening and get all their documents and everything ready for that.
I'll just connect you both by text, okay? So you, Alexis and Andrea, you can be connected. I'll just do a text right now so it's shared.
Thanks.
You rock. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. It's me, Marlene. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, everyone.